Well, we've come to the second to last of our evenings on Richard Rolle, and we now have reached chapters 33 to 37 of The Fire of Love, Incendium Amoris. So I think if you wanted to find a reason why Richard Rolle is called a mystic, then I think here in these chapters, you absolutely have it set out really clearly for us, because the way he tries to describe the mystical experience, and I guess his own mystical experience, so he's trying to speak out his personal knowledge, the way he tries to use language to harness that experience is really what has interested particularly those who study the area of the medieval English mystics, so that's in the English department, and also those who study mysticism maybe from a theological or a religious point of view. I think these are the core bits. So if Richard Rolle has just really annoyed you and you think, I can't stand this man, then get rid of all else that he says. And this is the bit that you might want to come back to again and again and just ponder. So let's have a little look at what he's trying to articulate, at the experiences he's describing, and the language that he's using to do this. So I think it's pretty clear to say that he uses three main images, and they're not just in these chapters. These images actually run throughout the Incendium Amoris. They keep popping up at times, but this is the most concerted effort where he uses the language to express an experiential moment. So, of course, he's writing in Latin. So the terms that he's using can also be understood in Latin. And I think it's quite nice if we use the Latin. So the first is calor. So if you think of calor gas, then you've got it. It's all about heat, calor. Or there's another term for it, which is fervor, and calor. So that's all about the heat, the fire, that we've actually spent quite a lot looking at throughout this book. Then there's dulcor, which is sweetness. He's mentioned it a little bit, but it's really expanded here. And finally, canor, which if you think of cantor and cantoris and all of that, then it's song. And it's really interesting to think that he's not using the language of music here. Welcome back, everyone. And we just got a bit of a shut off then from, I think it must have been something to do with a bit too much heat going on down here. Anyway, we're all back, and I'm delighted that I haven't lost a single person. So fantastic. That's really brilliant. So I was just talking about canor, about song, and how interesting it is that he doesn't use the language of music per se, but he uses the language of singing. And of course, you know, singing is such a kind of visceral act that it's about putting music into language, into the voice of ourselves. So it's bringing something alive. So it's just interesting to hang on to that. Why is it song that he uses, and not just about the music and the music of the spheres and all that sort of background that there is. So let's have a look at each of these in turn quickly. So the first one, of course, is heat, the fire of mystical love. Now, Richard Rolle's not unique in using this language. There is, of course, a basis of the language of fire throughout Christian mysticism, but also in the Old Testament and in the New Testament. But it really comes into its own from the 13th century and Ancre Novisa, where the mystics really cite Jesus's words in Luke 12:49, where he says that he came to bring a fire in order to light a fire. And of course, Richard Rolle then takes this language of fire and enlightening to an absolute extreme, as we have seen. So this sense of fire runs throughout his mystical experiences. It's there in the critical stages where it's seen as burning up sins. So it has a very powerful effect on the moral life of the soul, purifying it in a sense. But we also find it in the language of rapture and of ecstasy, where heat is turned into all fire, so the person becomes all flame through that wonderful, unio mystica, the union of Christ, of union of the soul with Christ in the heights of the mystical experience. We need to take note here, of course, that the language Rolle is using is not imaginary. He's not using it as a metaphor. He's not using it as a simile. So he's not saying that my experiences were like fire or like heat. He's actually saying that in reality, this is what they were. And that's really important, that he's not using a metaphor. He's not using heat as a metaphoric language to sort of point to something, but he's saying that's absolutely what he experienced. So he experienced heat, he experienced fire. And that's really important to hang on to when we start delving into what the language is doing here. So if we move on to the second one, which is sweetness. This is a kind of adjunct to fire and song, because both of these, both fire and song, bring about a sweetness. So you don't have sweetness on its own. It's because of the fire, it's because of song that there is then this sensation of sweetness. So they're deeply connected. One follows on from the other. It doesn't stand alone, unlike the fire and the song. So it's always connected. And it can be described as being utterly unique. I suppose it's what we would describe as a state of bliss. State of bliss. And finally, just have a look at how he uses the language of song. So by contrast, canon or song, Richard Rolle heard, appears to be what he says, the last and concluding stage of the mystical experience. Now, of course, this idea of music and song has run all the way throughout Incendium Amoris as a kind of central theme that he keeps coming back to again and again and again. But it's at this stage that he really goes in to the kind of ecstatic language in trying to articulate that song, the mystical song, the heavenly song in which he is participating. And this was, of course, first mediated by Richard Rolle, by or to him, by his own singing. So it begins with the physicality of singing the Psalms. And in a sense, it's that physicality which then prepares him for moving beyond the physical to actually the heavenly song itself. And he hears what he says is, and to quote, a mystical resonance that does not issue forth issue forth from the singer himself, but is heard above him and therefore is supernatural in character. Calor and dulcor, so heat and sweetness, are both understood by Rolle as preparatory stages which will lead to this song. So song for Richard Rolle is the highest the highest expression of the mystical experience that he's trying to articulate. So what does Rolle mean by this and the other language that he's using? How is he using this language? Are they images? Are they metaphors? Are they real describers of an experience? Or are they just pointers? Well, I think that actually what they're doing is they're pointers. So they're not images, they're not metaphors, they're not similes, they're none of that. They're actually just pointing. So they take you to what Vince Gillespie beautifully put as to the edge of the apophatic. So as far as language can go, and then says, but it's not this, it's that, it's something else. And I think it's really important that we hang on to that actually all attempts to verbalize this kind of encounter or experience that they're trying to describe is ineffable. So it cannot be described. They're trying to put into words something which cannot be put into words. So language at this stage is always going to fall short. And I guess that's why Richard Rolle starts using language in quite a weird way. He sort of heaps it up. He pushes it. He pushes at the word so much that they begin to actually lose their sense. Henry Suso puts this in a really good way when he says that they use images to drive out images. So it's like you overuse something so much that it's actually lost its meaning, and it's that sort of place that language is trying to get us to. So Richard Rolle takes language not necessarily of song and music and heat, but what then he does, as I've said, is that he pushes it to its extreme, heaping up more and more and more images and expressive descriptions until the language nearly collapses and explodes beyond the significance. And I think that's where he wants to get his text to try and explain the experience that he has. It's as if Rolle uses language of song to capture what it means by rapture or ecstasy as its experience, which Canor, Fervor and Duca all try in their own way to express. Now you may ask the question, so why? Why are you bothering? Why are you bothering even trying to express this? Why are you why are you worrying about expressing something which is indescribable? Just say it's indescribable, or it's a mystery, or let it hang there. But for Richard Rolle, you have to remember that at heart he's a teacher. And this is what this text is all about. He's trying to teach. He's trying to guide. He's trying to say to contemplatives who will read this that if you have these experiences, don't worry. You're not odd. You're not, these are good. This is showing you how close you are to God. This is showing you how much you love. This is showing how love is transforming your life and making you able to rise above all that, will pin you back onto the earth, and hold on to that and keep going. He says that a lot to us, just keep going, keep going. And I think that's why he takes so much pains to try and explain it to us. Just want to end by saying that it's really interesting. Wolfgang Riel, who was an eminent scholar in the English mystics and very, very well renowned. He talks about Richard Rolle, and he highlights just how much the language Richard Rolle uses is based on the language that the Cistercians use, particularly Bernard of Clairvaux. And I think making that association is very interesting, and it's not always been one that has been drawn. And he draws out one of the texts that is attributed to Bernard of Clairvaux, and it's called Dulcis Jesu Memoria, Dulcis Jesu Memorial. But good old Edward Caswell in the 19th century translated this into English, and you may recognize this hymn, which I'm now going to say, and just listen for very similar language that's being used. Jesus, the very thought of thee with sweetness fills the breast, but sweeter far thy face to see, and in thy presence rest. Nor voice can sing, nor heart can frame, nor can the memory find a sweeter sound than thy blessed name, O Saviour of mankind. O hope of every contrite heart, O joy of all the meek, to those who fall, how kind thou art, how good to those who seek. But what to those who find are this, nor tongue nor pen can show, the love of Jesus, what it is, none but his loved ones know. Jesus, our only joy be thou, as thou our prize will be. Jesus, be thou our glory now, and through all eternity. Now, I'm sure some of you recognize that. It's a hymn that we have sung, I'm sure, at the cathedral. And hear how the language there. So Bernard de Clairvaux is writing late 11th, early 12th century, and Richard Rolle is writing late 14th century. So as we say, that tradition of the language used to try and express love of Christ and the experience that it is for a lover of Christ is pretty much very similar, very, very similar. And of course, Richard Rolle, as we know, he doesn't leave it there. He takes it onto a whole new level just to try and express the inexpressible.